what do you think is New Jersey's systems for funding like public school, and what is its strengths and weaknesses?
So it's a broad
That's a
question.
broad question, right?
I
Yeah.
can, I think I can speak a little bit more to the superintendent angle of things, I suppose. And Corey, you can speak to the BA perspective if you'd be willing to. I think that, and Corey, correct me if I make any mistakes here, because school finance is not an area that I studied specifically. And that is one of the challenges of a school superintendent. If you've come up through a different side than the school finance side, you might have more familiarity as a superintendent with other aspects of district leadership. But I will say that, New Jersey's funding formula in particular has had a long and complicated history. And it's been a real struggle to quote unquote get it right, because everybody has a different definition of what right would look like. Does right look like every district getting the same amount per pupil? Or does that do a disservice to students who have limited English proficiency or low socioeconomic status, for example? If the need of the student is greater, should the apportionment of funding be correspondingly greater? And then I guess that leads to the question of, how are we measuring those needs of the students? How frequently are we measuring the needs of the students, and what instruments are we using to do so? And I think that's some of what the struggle has been over time. And, I know right now we're engaged in a bit of a struggle with S2, and it feels a little bit like district is pitted against district, with the funding formula changing and theoretically things being balanced out. But some of our sister districts right around the corner are in incredibly challenging situations right now with the changes in the funding formula. So it makes for some challenging conversations about, what does fair mean? What does equitable mean for a student in need?
And it seems like over the last 20 years that because of all of the accountability with the state, that the state's involvement in financing schools has taken a larger role. So what do you think the state's role should be in financing public education?
I teach a school finance course for New Jersey ASBO, and I give them a case study to do. I give them a choice of two, but one of them has to do with school funding. And, I threw in Illinois as the state example, because that might be like the most foreign to them. They might think of the tri-state area and their understanding there. So what I say is, what if this funding formula applied to your district? Like, we're going to put, as a state, we're going to increase sales tax, we're going to decrease property taxes, we're going to increase income taxes. So, but we're going to give everybody more state aid. So some of the best answers to that case study have to do exactly what you're talking about. The more state aid districts tend to get, the more state involvement there is. There are strings attached to a lot of those dollars. And that speaks to federal dollars as well. When you get Title I money, there are reporting requirements that go with those funds. When we get these, in 2010, when we got districts called it the Obama money, what are you all doing with the Obama money? Well, we got a state aid cut in 2010. And then in 2011, we got this Obama money to help the recession. And they wanted you to save jobs. So there was a reporting that said, we gave you, $250,000. Tell us how many jobs you saved, and in what areas. So there was, it wasn't audited. You could have been like, well, I saved one technology coordinator and 2 school nurses. Nobody was auditing the information, but there's the politicians want to give the money, but then they also want the feedback as to how it's been spent, and whether that's to toot their own horn, pat themselves in the back a little bit, but that's their job. Their job is to fight for us. And so they want to know, well, what did you do with it? I want to know that my money did some good. And so back to your point about, more state involvement, the more that a state funds local schools, the more they want to have a say in how that money is spent, or at least have monitoring, compliance, feedback come back to them.
And does that make sense if they're saying that you need to provide this service for an ELL student or for special ed, then they should supplement the funds to provide that education or to meet that standard?
And they do, to an extent. There are, the school funding formula has these esoteric weighting factors in it. And so it says, okay, you reported that you have, say, 50 English language learners. We're going to give that a weighting factor of 1.2. So you say, well, where did that come from? You know, so where people are like, give me the funding formula. Everybody has the formula, but it's those weighting factors that we say, well, where did that come from? Whether it's your low income, your ELL, your special ed population, you can get this state aid printout and I can give you the one for West Long Branch. And you're like, wow, this looks very comprehensive. But if I tell you I'll give every district $1 million, you're going to back into that weighting factor to make sure it comes out to the dollars that are available.
That's part of what I'm sure you've seen in the news, Mr. Falgaris, about, you know, S2 being contested, the state being sued for additional information.
Stephen Edelstein is partner at Wiener Law Group, which is representing 6 districts who have seen hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars cut from their budget in recent years. Last week, the district won their lawsuit they filed against the state education department in January 2021, seeking more information on how tax dollars are divided between Jersey schools under the S2 formula, an algorithm used to decide how state funding is divided among roughly 600 districts statewide.
It baffles my mind that the Department of Education doesn't come clean. It's like they're the Wizard of Oz and we can't look behind the curtain. Listen, if there's nothing wrong with the formula, show us. It's very simple. But unfortunately, we've had to now go to court. The court has even awarded counsel fees to these towns because of the state's improper conduct here.
Assemblyman Gregory McGuckin represents the 10th district in Jersey, which includes parts of Ocean County. He says the S2 formula has drained Toms River and Brick Township the most.
So, for instance, this year, Toms River lost $8 million in school funding. $8 million, a 14% cut in state aid. Brick Township lost $5.3 million, and that was a 19% cut to our state aid. And this has been going on now for a number of years. And each year it just gets compounded over and over again.
No child should be a loser in education.
The lawsuit forces the state to give up its math and explanation, but it does not require the state to give any district money. No word on when the districts will receive the formula.
Funding formula, the pieces, I guess the code to the cipher to unlock, like, can we backwards engineer this and see what numbers you plugged in to make this our amount of state funding? And the state has been very, I guess you can say, less than forthcoming with those pieces of information, saying that they're deliberative, that they are privileged pieces of information. The school should have everything they need to calculate out how S2 funding formulas are applied to each district to result in that much state aid. But Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, the information's not there. You can't make those calculations without the pieces that are missing.
Right. At one point, the state claimed that their formula was proprietary because there are 21 exemptions to the Open Public Records Act. And one of them has to do with proprietary materials, which is really like, if I am a software company, I can say, well, you can't have the code to my software because then you could reverse engineer my software. But this is a state funding formula. So for them to be like, well, it's proprietary. It's like, I'm not trying to compete with you, you know.
I'm starting my own state agency and delivering aid. I'm trying to understand what you gave me.
Right. And so they've tried to block it every which way they can from districts doing this. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. Like let's take we have 4 Abbott districts or former Abbott districts in the county of Monmouth: Keensburg, Asbury Park, Neptune, Long Branch. Keensburg, Asbury Park, and Neptune, all S2 districts. Long Branch, tripping over money.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Is there a state close to us in our region that has a better funding formula? Or is there, based on your experience, strategies that we can implement to better the funding formula, to make it more equitable?
One of the things that's unique about New Jersey is our local reliance on property taxes. So other states do rely on property taxes, but they collect them directly. So as a school district, if I levy $12 million in taxes, I collect $12 million in taxes from the municipality. When I give them, hey, here's your tax bill, I collect 100%. The municipality might not.
Yeah.
So they have to have an allowance for uncollectible accounts, but I collect 100%. In other states, that is not the case. And that blows my mind
Yeah.
because of the way that I was brought up into this system. I'm like, what do you mean you don't get 100%? I get 100%. I never have to worry about a municipality saying, oh, sorry, we don't have it. I get it first. I get 20% up front first.
They pay their school bill before anything else, basically.
Exactly. Well, they got to pay their payroll too, but all else being equal, I find that to be refreshing where some states don't have that. I think New Jersey also puts a very heavy emphasis on this progressive
Yes.
funding formula, but at the same time, we have a regressive tax structure that there are people in the highest tax brackets paying less than our middle income earners. So could we afford more state aid if our tax or if our income tax structure was more progressive and less regressive? Well, we possibly could. Again, I don't know enough about it to say that we're going to fix it. But I do think that I don't know enough about other states' funding formulas to say whether they're good. And New Jersey overall provides, I think, more state aid than many other states and has, again, a lot of mandates that go with that. Some are very good. Some are more restrictive or more prescriptive than federal. Like New Jersey's special ed law, much more prescriptive than the feds. So if the feds say that the ratio of teachers to students, is like one teacher for every 12 students, New Jersey's like, how about 8? Or, something to that effect, or how many grades we can put together in a self-contained class. New Jersey is going to shrink that. So whatever those rules are, New Jersey is much more prescriptive and restrictive than many other states. So we like to think we do it better that way.
And it bears out. Our educational systems in New Jersey consistently perform higher than other states. It does come with strict rules to go along with it, things that we must do, must demonstrate to, otherwise, why are we receiving the money? Is kind of the implied message there.
And apparently that was one of the funding strategies in the past would be to look at a really good performing district and find out what they're doing and how much money they're spending, and then try to reverse engineer to see, well, how much money you need per student, and then apply that across the board. But is there a way to say that a special ed student costs this much, an ELL this much, a regular ed, a gifted and talented, and then look at your population and based upon who you have, give out the money?
I think that, you can get a broad stroke idea maybe using a strategy like that. But I think about my husband works in the airlines. He's an airline pilot. And when he calculates his weights and balances for the plane so that he knows that he has enough to get the lift to take off when he's heavy and, to make it to his destination. And if there's a line of weather, how much circling is he going to have to do? Is he going to divert and need a safe place to land? There's a generic weight that they calculate for each of the passengers and a generic weight they calculate for each piece of luggage. And they use those numbers to plug it into the formula. But when you take a look around Newark Airport, you see there's really no generic body shape. There's really no, set number that each passenger. So you can maybe get a broad stroke idea, and that's what the pilots do. But in education, when every kid's needs is so specific, I would find a method like that to really miss the fine details that matter so much in helping grow kids to where they need to get. And that's the perennial challenge is, how do we keep our finger on the pulse of who our students are specifically, what their needs are, if they have extraordinary needs, and I think there's also, saying a student is an English language learner and therefore needs this much support precludes the fact that some of our ELLs are also gifted and talented learners. And so there's always deviation from a set norm. So I think that with something like students, it's really difficult to make a benchmark like that. You can use it for estimation purposes, but not for specific budgeting, I would say. Corey, do you disagree?
I think I'm going to put on my operations hat, and it goes to something that you spoke about with the tri-districts on Wednesday, that, there are several non-transporting districts in New Jersey. So the law says for K-8, your child can walk 2 miles to school, and that high school 2.5 miles. Now, tell me the last time you walked 2.5 miles, Mr. Fulgaris.
Maybe when I was in Disney, that was probably it.
Probably did more than that in Disney.
I'm sure you walked 4 times that when you were in Disney. So that's my point, is that Keensburg is a non-transporting district. Freehold Borough, non-transporting district. Asbury Park, non-transporting district. West Long Branch, non-transporting district. However,
Courtesy bus.
community feels that they want courtesy busing, and so they choose to spend $250,000 on courtesy busing.
Right.
And so, that was a very hot topic, if you remember. And that's something that came up at the Tri-District. Like, well, if we all regionalize, will our kids now get transportation? It's like, oh, hold on now. Then we need more buses, we need more drivers. And then your economies aren't quite there with that regionalization that you thought you had before. So there are unique decisions that districts make. I was the BA in Asbury Park from 2008 to 2011. So I'm intimately familiar with that budget. But I was a brand new BA in 2008, had never built a budget from scratch. So I did essentially what you're talking about. I was just trying to give my principals a framework for zero-based budget building. And I said, okay, K to 5, this is your per pupil amount. 6 to 8, this is your per pupil amount. And I'll give you a small, increment for middle school sports and extracurricular. And then I did the same thing at the high school. You guys get a base amount and a little bit more. And in theory, that is pretty much what happens. When you think about the types of activities that increase as you go up through the grades. But I did not give any weighting factor to ELL, special ed, anything like that. So to me, it made sense as a new BA that I had to have some basis to start from. But when it came to unique needs in the building, when you have neighborhood schools, I couldn't sell a tuna fish sandwich at Bradley Elementary School to save my soul. And Thurgood Marshall, less than a mile away, I sold out of tuna fish like every day. So there are just those weird differences that you're like, the whole town is 1.7 square miles, but you do have to treat each school differently, even though you're trying to think of K to 5, a homogeneous population. They're not. Whether even when they're general ed, it's not a homogeneous population. So, but what has blown my mind in terms of, I live in Asbury Park now. I know that budget. They're an S2 district. They lost like $8 million this year. I cannot even fathom what that looks like, but they still have their own custodians who start out making about $40,000. What do we pay custodians? Just about minimum wage. So on a 2,000 hour work year, that's about $26,000, and they get basic health benefits as opposed to a Cadillac family benefit plan, which in West Long Branch costs about $35,000 per employee. So you're talking, let's say, a custodian making $40,000 with a $30,000 healthcare plan. That's a $70,000 employee, as opposed to what we pay through outsourcing, which is about, let's say, $26,000. Huge difference.
Now, could they decide in Asbury Park to privatize or to go out of district for it?
Until legislation was passed about a year ago, kind of banning that. It's very union friendly, that they would have to go to the union first and say, okay, you need to do this, you need to do this. You're supposed to negotiate with your union now before that happens. I'm not even sure if I don't know all the steps now, but once upon a time they could without those restrictions. And the fact that no one has really looked at that, that would be a huge cost savings and keep dollars in the classroom. And that would be, that's something that I feel very strongly about, is outsourcing when it makes sense, in order to keep, more of those dollars towards instruction. So again, that's a choice as a district that they make.
When you're negotiating a teacher's contract, you don't know 4 or 5 years how much you're going to be getting from the state. How do you begin to forecast your budget and plan and then solidify a contract?
We used to be held to only a 3-year contract. So I can predict with reasonable certainty what our budget will be 2 to 3 years out. After 3 years, it loses some of its meaning. Then I'm really just throwing a dart at a dartboard. But still, I could do a 5-year projection and say, all else being equal, this is where we will be in 5 years. But I feel like every time I've done that, we can either get more state aid. And honestly, something that, all right, I'm going to talk a little bit out of school here, but in West Long Branch, new teachers only get single health benefits. So when we have a teacher retire or leave who has family benefits, the new person coming in gets single benefits. And that amount of breakage has helped balance the budget over the years. And so that's what I always say, like, even if you took a salary guide year one and you say, oh my gosh, if we kept all of these people by year 5, it would cost us this much. That would be accurate at that point in time. But it never is. We had 2 retirees this year, mid-year retirees that we didn't know about.
Yeah.
So you're always going to have that. Now, again, we don't want good teachers to retire. We don't want good teachers to leave. Sometimes they move out of state. I don't want to focus on the reasons for the turnover, but from a budgetary perspective, I do bank on that to an extent. And at Shore Regional, I don't have that at all. So the cost of the teacher's guide is a major concern, whereas at West Long Branch, that's a more forgiving part of my equation because of a certain amount of turnover.
We have a reasonable distribution of teachers of varying experience levels, those who are approaching the age where they might start to consider retirement, those who are brand new and on single benefits until they receive tenure. So all in all, as Corey's saying, it does balance out.
And we have quite a few who waive out, and that helps the budget too.
Right.
And at Shore, I have fewer people who waive out. I have 1 retirement for September 30th, and I had 0 retirements this year. I had 0 last year. Like it's almost eerie, like that we don't have the turnover here. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, is she going to retire yet? And we have teachers approaching 70, and they're like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, all right, well,
Well, that's
and they're
great.
good teachers. Like, so
I'm going.
that's good,
Yes.
But so every district is a little different like that.
Well, thank you. Last question. What advice would you each give a new principal or a new superintendent or a new BA making their first budget?
Yeah, when I started in February, the budget was effectively almost ready to go. We start the budgeting process a lot earlier than most people think we do. We really start thinking about the budget for the following school year, really in September, October, wouldn't you say, Corey? Because over the summer, we do the bulk of the ordering of the major things that we anticipated needing for the upcoming year. Because if you're going to spend taxpayer dollars, it should go to maximum benefit for kids for the longest period of time within that school year. So I think that, the advice that I would give, having gone now through my first full year and a half, would be ready earlier than you think to really start thinking about what matters. I think a school budget is the way you express the priorities of your school district and the way you support those priorities and make them explicit. I would say talk to your BA. If you are a new superintendent, my biggest advice would be, talk to your BA, ask questions. Nobody on this earth is expected to know everything that you need to know about everything. We all serve a function, a critical function within a school district. And I think, being transparent between the BA and the superintendent and the Board of Education, and then folding in the administrators, I think it's really important for a principal to understand how their piece of the puzzle plays into the larger picture of what a building principal's role is in a student's overall experience in a school district. I think it helps to have that bigger picture as you're executing your smaller, finer details. That's where I'd start, I think, is just, be ready to hit the ground earlier than you think and start planning ahead for that budget, because it creeps up on you. It needs to be substantially ready to go near January, February. You start fine tuning in March and you're rocking. Corey, what about you?
So my first year as a BA, 2008 Asbury Park, Kathy Baumgartner was a brand new principal in an elementary school that they were reopening. So it had been closed for asbestos remediation. And so she's asking her fellow principals, like, where are my books? Where are my cafeteria tables? And they sent her all the cruddy ones And so she's like, all right. So she came to me like hat in hand, like, how do I order things? Where are my budget dollars? Like, I need to open this building. Then even at the end of her first year, she reached out to her teacher. She's like, I am so out of office supplies. She came back to her desk and there were like mounds on her table because teachers are hoarders. So I think that she credits me today with like, Corey, you taught me so much about the budget that I was never like, oh my God, how do I order this? She was like, hey, secretary, this is what I need, order this. And it empowered her to run her building. She's about to put in her retirement and they moved her around. One thing that she did really well was just build that culture and climate in the schools between coming to me and asking for help. Like, I'm a new principal, help me. Then to her teachers, I need supplies, help me, you know? So that's what I would say is you're likely going to be hired and inherit a budget that you didn't build and you're going to have to live with. So it's finding out, how do I transfer money between my budget lines? We make budget transfers every month. Things, plans change, things change. We have $180,000 of mold remediation we didn't plan for, So it's, we did get some aid for that. We got some insurance coverage for that. So it's putting those pieces together, just ask for help. And
Yeah.
Christina and I meet every single week.
We do.
And sometimes it's, invariably something comes up that has to do with budget. Even if it's something simple like, hey, I want to pay 2 teachers to go to a workshop on a Saturday. Can we do that? How do we do that? Did we budget for that? Do we have a line? Show me where the line is.
Mhm.
And when you think about it, I'm like, oh, 2 teachers, 2 hours, $48. You're looking for $192. I think we'll find $192.
We'll find the money.
Challenging,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So it's things like that. I find that it's my job. Like, how do we get to yes? It's not my job to throw up roadblocks. So if I got a new principal, the only time I've gotten frustrated is when they really don't want to know anything about budget.
Yeah.
Just tell me what line to use. I don't want to know anything about it. I'm like, well, I don't say that to you about educating the kids.
Right.
You figure it out. Like that. No, tell me how you do that. Tell me what resources you need to make that happen. I want to be a part of the process. So when it comes to budget, I just want you to be a part of the process.
I think that's something that you and I have really worked on this year, Corey, is opening up that process, bringing everybody who needs to be a part of it in so that it is transparent. We all know what our part is that we play. And I think now, Mr. Felgaris, you can understand why I meet with Corey every week. Like, she and I both believe that communication in the business office between the superintendent and the business administrator is really, really critical to success. Really critical.
And she's doing it for 2 school districts. Whew.
I know.
Hey, listen, I appreciate this so much. It is Friday. You're ready to go to Memorial Day weekend, and you took time to do this. It really means a lot. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Not at all. We're happy to do it, Mr. Felgaris. I see you all the time. You're always coming out to the schools to do for the schools and the kids. We really appreciate it too. So our pleasure. I hope we were able to be helpful in some way.
You definitely.
And anything else for us?
No, that's it. You have a good weekend.
All right, you too. Enjoy your weekend.
Okay.
Thank you again, Corey.